Hey, that's Sierra. She came over to say hello. Welcome, everyone. My name is Julia, and I am a career coach and strategist with over 10 years of experience helping ambitious professionals like you find clarity in who you are and helping you align your values and preferences to your career. This podcast is one of the main ways that I share my knowledge, strategies, and experience with you. And if you check out the podcast page on my website, I have all of the seasons there. They're organized and easily accessible so that you can find what you need. Along with the podcast, I also have multiple courses, resources, and I offer one-on-one customized career coaching covering career exploration, career management, and career advancement. So head over to ridethetidecollective.com to check that all out. I will also leave a link in the show notes and the blog post for this episode so that you can find everything that you need. This season is really exciting for me because I'm actually taking a pause on interviewing professionals. I know that that's been very popular, but I want to share my control your career process with you. And I have been in the career industry as a career coach for over 10 years. So I'm very well acquainted with all of the career theories and processes that are out there. But when I started my own business, I wanted something different. I never really found what I was looking for, even when I was working professionally for somebody else. I put together, a lot of different theories and activities and things that I was seeing, and so I created a lot of custom processes for people. And so when I started my own business, I knew that I wanted to create a custom program and process that had some structure to it, but also allowed for flexibility and then spanned multiple career scenarios, something that looked at your career as a whole and not just one moment within your career. And so most career development processes focus more on obtaining a position or the job search process than the entirety of your career or, really digging into different situations. And honestly, we spend most of our time doing career management, right? The day to day of what's happening within our careers. And so I wanted to create a process and a structure that would help people work through multiple scenarios, whether you were in the career exploration phase, the management phase, or the advancement phase. So this season is going to be an overview of each phase within my process, the Control Your Career process. And I'm going to talk about different activities and actions associated with each phase so that you can start controlling your career. Full disclosure, this is a program that I have. This is a process that people are a part of. It's a structured process, again, with some flexibility. This season is meant to really introduce you to it and to give you some resources so that you can do it on your own. If you want to go through the process, if you want me to be your coach, I'm happy to give you information on that. It's not really the purpose here. The purpose is to help resource you and give you some tools that you can take immediately to use. And we'll start in this episode. I have some questions and some activities that I want you to think about before we move on to the next episode. So make sure you stay till the end to get that information. But what we're going to do in this episode is I'm going to give you a high level overview of each of the phases so that you have a basic understanding of what it is. And we're going to have an honest conversation about what it means to control your career and some of the barriers that you might encounter. So why this topic? Why this idea of controlling your career? I think for some people, it actually seems maybe a little bit aggressive, and it is meant to be that way. I want you to be able to control your career. And part of the reason is because for the majority of my professional career, outside of owning my business, my career was controlled by other people. My parents had expectations of my career. Society has expectations of what it means to have a good career. And once I was in my career and I was doing what I really wanted to do, I always felt like my career trajectory was controlled by everyone else, usually somebody I reported to in most situations. And I got tired of that. And once I left and started my own business and I reflected back on my career, I realized how out of control my career actually was. And this was hard because I have traditionally been perceived as a strong person, someone who plans, who has opinions, who has a clear path. I think that's how people have seen me, especially at that time in my career. But honestly, underneath all of that, the majority of the decisions that I thought I was making, they were actually fueled by other influences and expectations that really weren't mine. And like I said, like owning my own business really opened my eyes to that because I had to deconstruct what had happened within my career and why I felt the way that I felt. And so that realization really fueled this process. It's really the basis of why I created this process. And I'm in a unique position because I have the fundamentals of career development. I know all the theories. I've also been coaching for over 10 years, but I have my experience intertwined with that. And I think that that's really what helps give me a different perspective for this particular program and this process. Is it's a combination of what I know and my own experience. And honestly, my individual coaching experience and working with clients for over 10 years, all that information was put together to help create this process. And that's really where all of this came from. And I love it. I'm so excited. You'll notice if you follow me on social media, a lot of my content is centered around this process in some way, because I think it's so important to understand why we're doing what we're doing and where are we in the process and what are we trying to do. So as I mentioned before, the general career development process centers around the job search. And kind of the career exploration process as well, versus looking at the entirety of your career. And especially when you get to a mid-career point, it becomes really hard to figure out who you are, where you're at, because you've been influenced by so many things. You've had so many different experiences that sometimes that traditional process doesn't work as well as we want it to. Now, the basic process encompasses a discover, explore, plan, act outline. And my process also has that. But there's more direction and more intentionality to help you really control your career with sustainable impact and habits. And that to me is one of the pieces that really sets it apart. We're really digging deeper than the normal process would suggest. And then we're looking at sustainability beyond, what if you quote unquote solve the thing that you're having an issue with, then what? What do we do beyond that? And so we look at custom strategy for that. And I'll go into that in just a second. One thing I want to be clear about too is where we get career theories from. And I'm not going to dive into the detail of it because for the majority of you, this would be very boring, but I'm happy to provide additional information if you'd like it. But when I was in grad school and then early in my, when I was learning, how to be a career coach and learning all the resources out there and everything, I realized very quickly that a lot of the theories and the processes that we follow, they've been around for a very long time. And if they've been around for a very long time, it means that the research that they're based on was done at a different time. likely done on men in the workplace, likely done on white men in the workplace, in a time when the world of work looked very, very different. And as a career coach, that was one of the things that I noticed when I was learning all these processes and all these theories, because people don't fit into a box. And the world today and the influence of technology and all of these things that we go through, the world of work is so different now. Opportunity is so global, and we have so many different paths we can take, but we also have so many different worldviews and experiences, and just how the world has changed in the last 50 to 60 years is insane. And when I created this process, a lot of what fueled it, a lot. A lot of what fueled it was wanting a process that spanned across multiple scenarios. It doesn't matter if you're a man, it doesn't matter if you're a woman, it doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your ethnicity or where you are in the world. Like, I wanted a process that really could span across that, and that is what I created. So as we talk about controlling your career and career development in general, we have to look at where we're getting our theories. We have to look at where we're getting our information. And again, because I wanted something that would span across multiple scenarios, it's not just about the job search. And if you notice, if you've been following me for a long time, I don't focus on the job search a lot. I mean, I recently released a resume guide, and the only reason I released it is because I got asked about resumes so much. But I don't do resume reviews. I don't focus on the job search process like a lot of career coaches do, because to me, that's manageable. That is an easy, manageable thing to do. And there are a lot of people that are out there doing it. I'm focusing on career transformation. I am focusing on digging into who you are and this process, controlling your career, controlling the trajectory. And a lot of times, once you have all that information, the job search process, if that's what you need, becomes very easy, right? And so that's what we're starting with. That's why we're doing this. And what does it all mean? What does it mean to control your career, right? And this is such an interesting question, because a lot of times we don't even realize that we've lost control until we're desperate. We've talked ourselves, into and out of situations because we have to, right? We're trying to survive. We're trying to make it through. But the reality is, the feeling of losing control, it can happen at any point. Management changes, you're laid off, company merger or acquisition, those are the worst. In many cases, life happens. New relationship, you get married, you have children, you move, you have to move unexpectedly. Maybe you end a relationship, death. If you've been following my story, I talk a lot about that, how my world changed when my parents passed, how it changed my view of life and what I wanted. Mental health. I talk a little bit about mental health, but I don't talk a lot about it. But it's a huge factor. If you've been in book club with me, we talk about mental health a lot. And we talk about those challenges because it's so impactful to our careers, anxiety, ADHD, all of these things, depression, chronic illness, all these things that people have to deal with, that impacts your career. And some people, they're aware of it, they've been dealing with it. Other people, things just happen, right? Again, death of somebody, it just happens. And sometimes you're not aware of it. It can come out of nowhere. And so the reality is, you might be someone who has had it together for a very long time, and you've had a plan and everything's been going a certain way, But then something happens and it triggers something inside of you that requires attention and likely some type of change so that you can move forward. And those are the times when we feel like we've lost control, where we have to take a step back and we have to look at where we've been and what we've been doing to be able to move forward well. So controlling your career is really centered around being clear about who you are and developing a strategy and plan that best suits your situation in this current season. Okay, in this current season. So the strategy that you need when you start a new position, for example, is going to look totally different than if you are having a child, right? And what your life looks like while you're pregnant or your partner's pregnant and then having that child. Your perspective, your needs, your preferences, everything will be unique to that situation and that season of your life. So controlling your career helps you navigate shifts within your career by taking you through a process that helps you dig in, helps you dig deep into who you are, and then execute a custom strategy that fits your needs in that season. And my hope too is that you go through this process, whether you're going through it with me on the podcast or you go through the full program for coaching, but you go through this process, and as things happen, right, as you go through things in your career and in your life, you look back and you remember, okay, this is who I am. This is the core. This is what's going on. And you're able to look at situations with a new lens where you're sitting in the driver's seat as much as you possibly can, right? All right, let's briefly look at the 5 phases. I'm not going to go in depth with these. Like I said, we're going to do a high level overview because each episode moving forward is going to dig into each of these phases. We're going to talk about what is covered in those phases and what I cover as a coach in those phases, and then giving you actions and all of that. So this is gonna be high level of what we're going to be going through over the next couple of months for this season. So first is phase 1. So we've got phases. The first phase is an evaluation phase, and I call it rate your reality. Sometimes I call it realistic reality. And the idea is that you are very clear about your past, your present, and your future. And what we do is we go through an intensive set of questions. We go through a lot of different activities to help you really dig into who you are. I think this is one of the hardest parts of this process. I also think it's one of the most unique. It requires a high level of trust between my client and myself, even as you're going through this, and I'm not sitting across from you, but you're digging into some of the questions that I'm going to ask through the podcast. You have to be willing to release that information for yourself. So that phase is, I think, one of the hardest phases to go through, but I also think that it's one of the parts of this program and parts of this process that really is different and is set apart from other programs that I've seen and other processes that I've seen. Phase 2 is exploration. This is one of my favorites because we get to do a lot of different assessments. I love assessments. I think they're a great way to build language and to give us really great understanding of who we are, and they're a really great starting point for us, right? So we use assessments as a starting point, and then we build a profile of who you are. And so again, through this, I'm going to share the assessments that I use. I'm going to give you different information about them and exercises that you can actually do for yourself as well. And then phase 3 is strategy. And I also call this the purpose-driven plan. So one thing you'll know about me, or you'll learn if you're new to me, is I love values. I want everything to be values centered. I have a free values assessment on my website because I think it is so important for people to understand who they are. And so your strategy, your plan is really going to be tailored to you, to who you are. And so we're going to talk about what that means. How do you build a strategy? What are the components? What does it look like? And how do you align that with who you are, your personality, all of that? And then we get into execution. I think this is another unique part of the actual program that people go through, because we take in the program, it's 4 sessions, but we take a period of time for you to really work through whatever your goal is. Sierra, hey, Sierra, lay down. My dog is in here and she decided that she wanted to start digging. I don't know where she went. She doesn't like it when I do things like this, so she starts digging. She's a mini schnauzer, so they're known for digging. But anyway, okay, so in the execution phase, this is where you are really you're executing on whatever the plan is. And so we start that process so that you have support. For the purposes of the podcast, what I'm going to do is actually go through different different career scenarios that you might have during this time. So if you need to do more exploration, if you need career management, if you want to advance, if there's something specific, skills, all of that, I'm going to go through and just talk about what that means and what that could look like for you. So again, you can take that and you can say, well, I'm in a place of exploration, so here are the resources that you can use. So I'm going to help break some of that down based on general things that I tend to see people asking for. In the actual program, that's all customized. It's probably a combination of multiple things, but we figured that out as we go through that particular program. So phase 5, I think this is the other really unique part of this particular process, which is growth, and I call it high impact habits. And basically what we are doing is we are creating new habits and sustainable strategies for career growth, whatever that looks like for your situation. And so we dive into your schedule, we dive into expectations within your life. Like, we are really picking everything apart to make sure that the plan and the strategy that we've put in place is going to work and is going to be sustainable. Also, this is really looking at post-program. So if you actually go through the program, this phase is basically saying, can you execute on this? Can you continue to execute on it? And what does that look like moving forward? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about habits. We're going to talk about schedules and all of that in phase 5. All right, now let's talk about the barriers, because this is one of the questions I get a lot. It's usually around barriers. People get to a point of desperation, and that's when they decide to make a change. Which that's fine. I think if you're in a place where you need a trigger to help move you forward, that's fine. That's not uncommon. However, when you can go through something like this process, again, whether it's through the podcast episodes or through the program with me, when you have a clearer head, when you're not fully immersed in intense emotions of the situation, it's actually better. And I mean, I help you unpack some of that early on so that we can do it, but let's talk barriers. Hi. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? I gotta record. What you doing? Oh, hi. Oh, okay. Want to say hi? Oh. Hey, that's Sierra. She came over to say hello. Okay, okay. You gotta go lay down. Go lay down. Okay. So, what are the barriers to controlling your career? Um, Everybody has barriers. Everybody has barriers. And I'll tell you that one of the main barriers that I see from people is themselves, the internal talk, right? You've convinced yourself of whatever situation you're in. Um, you've put a barrier on yourself. You think you're not good enough. You think you can't get out of it. You think you'll never be able to control it. That's a mindset issue. We do talk about mindset because it's such like such a main barrier for people to be able to truly embrace who they are and take control of situations. And a lot of that is fueled by people around us, whether it's parents, significant other, family members, managers, coworkers, mentors. People put barriers on us and limitations on us, sometimes because they're jealous, they don't want to see us succeed. Other times because once you start taking control, once you start really essentially taking back your power, it's hard for people to adjust when you haven't been that way. And so that's a huge barrier for a lot of people. Situations outside of our control. So I mentioned earlier, being laid off, right? That happens all the time. There are industries and companies that are layoffs happen, right? The difference is when you have some semblance of control over who you are, what you're doing, that transition, while still difficult, becomes easier because you know what to do. You know who you are. You know your capabilities. You are in control of yourself and your situation to the point where if that happens, you know what to do. You're ready to make the transition. You're ready to figure out what's next and you can move forward. Well, that to me is one of the main pieces of controlling your career. Systemic issues. This has to be mentioned because there are so many scenarios where systemic issues will impact somebody's career far beyond what they can control. And I will tell you, I have seen everything. I have seen ageism, oh man, on both spectrums. Young and older. Gender. That's probably the main one that I see these days. A lot of gender issues that are outside of my client's control. Race, still a thing. Absolutely still a thing. And I have clients who talk to me about it all the time. So there are a lot of issues. There are a lot of systemic issues that people are faced with that are outside of their control, right? But it still impacts their ability to control what's going on. So these are all barriers that we have to controlling your career. Why am I telling you that? Why are we talking about the barriers? Because you have to be aware of them. You have to understand, because it becomes an excuse, right? It becomes the reason for you to not take a step forward. It becomes a reason for you to not take action, right? And I'm not saying excuse because I don't think it's an excuse. When it's systemic, when it's outside of our control, that's not an excuse. That's a situation that you're in that you now have to navigate. Now, if you internalize it and make it an excuse, that's something totally different. But what I want to do is help you step out of that. So how do we take the situation that you're in and get you to step out of that and find yourself in a better situation, right? So let's talk about action for this episode because it is connected to barriers. I want you to consider what is in your control right now. This needs to be within your career, but also within your life because they are intertwined. They impact each other. And as much as I know people are out there trying to separate the two, it's very hard to separate the two. So they impact each other in different ways. So what is in your control right now? If you feel out of control, why? What is causing that? What is your perception of what is causing you to feel out of control? And then what do you need? What do you need to feel more in control? If I were to sit in front of you right now and ask you that, what do you need? What information do you need? What situation do you need to be in? What would help ease that feeling of being out of control? So that is your action for this episode. We're working on perception. We're working on, where are you at realistically? What is within your control right now? And the next episode, we're digging in. We are we are digging into it. You definitely want to come back. Episode 2 for this season is really going to ask some hard questions. It's going to dig into different scenarios and probably going to be one of the most impactful episodes for this season. So definitely come back. Thank you so much for listening. If you have made it all the way to the end of this episode, I would like to give you a gift. As I mentioned before, I recently released a resume guide for mid-career professionals. And if you're in a place where you're working on your resume or you'd like to update it, this guide is recruiter endorsed and it walks you through everything you need to write a standout resume. So I want you to use the code 5OFFPODCAST to take $5 off an already insanely good deal of $37. And I will see you next time.